Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the half hour. As many of you are aware, Colorado was slammed by a massive wildfire that happened in December. December of all things. Episode 18 will discuss more than just the massive wildfire in Colorado, but we will also hit it on a snowstorm that was the worst in California's history. And that will lead us to many questions pertaining to the impacts of climate change in today's world. As always, I'm Spencer.
And I'm YuYu.
And welcome back. We've made it to episode 18. Woo. That is a lot of episodes. It's one more than 17. So I want to let everybody know, thank you for all your support. It's been great. If you are watching this on the YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If everyone in this world who isn't subscribed to the YouTube channel and is subscribed to the YouTube channel, if everyone in the world was to click that subscribe button, we'd have over 7 billion subscribers. So let's shoot for that 7 billion subs. That is the best thing that can happen for this channel. And we know many of you have alternate accounts. We can make it to 10 billion. Trust me. So if everybody click that sub button, 7 billion subscribers. We can do it.
We're never going to make it to 7 billion subscribers. Besides the point. But yeah, this episode, we're going to talk a lot about weather. And I feel like this is the only episode we've done that focuses just specifically on weather patterns and weather. We've done climate change episodes, but not really climate change episodes. So yeah, I hope you're ready to listen to our news broadcast voices as we talk to you about weather.
And whether or not this will be a good episode or not will be totally besides the point. Enjoy the dad jokes. Anyway, we want to reference back to episode 10 before the podcast. This was on Biden's climate plan. I don't actually have a recollection of whether or not that passed. You can probably double check my thought on that. I don't think it's passed. Never saw anything in the news about like a big bill pertaining to climate change that has passed. But nonetheless, episode 10 is a very good reference point. You should see that link in the description. Watch that before you watch this episode. I also want to talk about some quick structural things on the YouTube channel. So on the YouTube channel, there's a brand new layout that we've got on there. And the reason why I want to talk about this is we do have a bunch of people who are in the speech and debate community who watch. So based on like specific things that you are looking for, I've developed some playlists on there and have put them together in all on just the main page for you to be able to reference back and look into. So this can always keep you updated on what's been happening each month, etc. So we've got playlists on US podcasts. You can find that all the way at the bottom. So if you're involved with United States Extemp, I would go there. We have a playlist on international podcasts, which is near the bottom as well. For people who enjoy more of like the collaborative, maybe interview style podcasts, we've got a playlist just for that. And each month there will be a playlist that breaks down like our episodes that we publish in that month. So everything in January is in a January 2022 playlist. And that started this month. You can't find a December 2021. I'm not going to do that. As much as I think that would be beneficial, we want to just keep it all contained. So you can find everything based on where you want to find your information on the YouTube channel in nice little playlists for you to do some research with. Before we even get into anything, we got a lot to talk about today. You want to discuss about social media?
Yeah, so coming into the new year in 2022, we have finally got around to making our own social media. And so the handle will be the Half Hour Extemp podcast on Twitter and on Instagram. Be sure to give those a like, a follow. But yeah, we have Instagram. It's going to be more specific towards kind of behind the scenes stuff, kind of snippets of little videos here and there. It's going to have very interesting photos of the both of us because it is behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, and if you want to be a part of deciding what we talk about in each of our episodes, make sure to go follow our Instagram and also go follow our Twitter account, because that is where polls are going to be. In terms of like legislation for climate, just a little update for that. While the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill have been able to pass through the House, mostly among Democratic Party lines, it hasn't really been able to gain any traction in the Senate. As we mentioned in the last episode, in episode 17, Joe Manchin in the Senate has voted no for the Build Back Better bill, meaning it is a 50 to 49 no vote for the Build Back Better bill. And that's really tragic. So that's where we are on legislation.
And kind of jumping back to social media real fast, links to Twitter and Instagram will be in the description. I'm updating podcast descriptions. So be sure to follow us. Help us out. Help the channel out. Click that follow button. Woo. All right. Without any further delay, we're going to talk about Colorado and specifically the wildfire that happened. It's a pretty big wildfire. It happened in December. Really weird that we're talking about a wildfire that happened in December of all things. And that's kind of like the indication of maybe we're having some discussion about climate change and stuff, and really how climate change is exacerbating this issue. Admittedly, kind of just a quick summary, we know that this is, from what it looks like, this wasn't started by climate change. Rather, this was started by humans, and it spread pretty quickly, and we can argue that that is because of climate change. But let's break this down real quickly, real fast. Hey, the massive wildfire that happened in Colorado is referred to as the Marshall Fire, and in total it destroyed 991 structures, damaged 127 structures, and burned nearly 6,000 acres worth of land. And for all things, as we mentioned, it did happen in the month of December, which is pretty unusual. The real mystery pertaining to the wildfires is how it started. Boulder County Sheriff Joe Pell discussed that there would be an open and active investigation pertaining to how the wildfire started. It was believed to be electrical lines that may have started the wildfires, originally from before this whole investigation started. But when they decided that they were going to look into this through an investigation, we knew that this was only going to take weeks or possibly months in order for this investigation to become complete. Unfortunately, in the midst of the wildfires, there was a snowstorm that had occurred. And while this is good for firefighters to get the flames under control in an easy manner, it made it difficult to search for missing people that they needed to find as the wildfire was going on. And through further investigation, there was no sign that power lines had started the fire in Colorado. Rather, there were down power lines that were in the area, but these were not really believed to have started the wildfire. This is a result of the issues that had occurred. There also exists a worry that some residents may have contributed to the fires that had occurred, or they may have started them on their own. And we're going to say this now, creating your own fires is not a good idea in windy weather. Sheriff Pell notes, quote, "If it turns out to be arson or reckless behavior with fire, we'll take appropriate actions." And this was later furthered by a statement by Governor Jared Polis. Quote, "If there was any form of deliberate or accidental arson, I fully expect that any of those responsible will be held fully responsible under the law for the utter devastation that was caused." It is important to note that Boulder County was experiencing high winds on the day that the fire was started, which means that if it was created by human interaction, there is no doubt that this wildfire spread really quickly. Something that I want to note, I have seen a few articles here and there that have stated that fires have been increasing because of climate change. I do want to reiterate something from episode 10, and that is we haven't really seen an increase in the amount of wildfires. What scientists really note is that it's burning more acres, and that's really the important part that we should understand. It's not the amount of wildfires that have been increasing, it's the amount that wildfires have been burning. As a matter of fact, I think from what I understand, wildfires have been decreasing. It's just they've become a lot better at burning more. So, nonetheless, in high wind weather, we shouldn't be burning anything. There is some skepticism about what started the wildfire. I'm going to make sure that we don't get ourselves in trouble, and we're going to avoid any of that skepticism where necessary. But at the end of the day, the Colorado wildfire, pretty big deal. A lot of places burned down. A lot of structures are damaged. And YuYu, unusual weather for a month of December.
Yeah. Talk about unusual weather. California has experienced seeing some really weird weather. And while it is winter, and while we associate like snow with winter, it is fairly unusual for California. And I will say I have a little snow globe right here of the Golden Gate Bridge. But it's not a snow globe because it rarely snows in California. It's actually a fog globe because there's more fog than there is like the appearance of snow. So that's why the snowstorm that has been happening in northern Colorado mainly is really weird and unusual, and something that people and even scientists have like taken note of. Oddly enough, the snowstorm that blew through into Colorado, this is the same snowstorm that blew through into northern California. So I know my section, of course, obviously covers California, but the snowstorm affected more than just California. It had affected Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Spencer mentioned. And these kind of western regions of the United States were the ones that experienced this heavy snowstorm. But California had a lot of damage that came with the snowstorm. There is like good news and there's bad news, but we'll go ahead and start with the bad news. For California, about 30 inches of snow fell in Northern California in the span of 24 hours in December. This is roughly 2.5 feet of snow, which might not sound like a lot to our Wyoming audience, but for California, it caused road closures and also avalanche warnings. Keep in mind that this wasn't just like one day, it was like a span of weeks. And even now they're expected to get more precipitation. So what damages kind of look like would be 50 miles of Highway 50 were closed, and westbound I-80 was closed due to the snowstorm too. Highway 50 has been reopened, but there is still heavy traffic around there, mainly because of all the snow that's around, but also a semi-truck experienced an accident along Highway 50, which backed up the roads. There were stories about how many of those stuck in traffic might have to spend the night in their cars just because of the amount of traffic that they experienced on that highway. Westbound I-80 is still closed. California officials warned to stay away from mountain roads, as this is where the snow is mostly collecting and where the avalanche warning is most prevalent, obviously. Now, I say avalanche warnings, but there have actually been avalanches and mudslides too, because it wasn't just snow, it's also heavy amounts of rain and rainstorms. So those have shut down Highway 89 and Highway 70. So those heavy snowstorms throughout Northern California have happened, and there's still like more to be expected along with more snow. What has recently happened with weather changes has brought California's snowpack up from 18% to 98% within the span of 2 weeks. Now, it's important to note that this sudden change isn't unprecedented. It is, however, very uncommon. And what's really unique about this is it usually happens within the course of an entire winter season, maybe once or twice throughout the span of 3 years. But this jump happened in the span of just December in a year, which is very uncommon. Now, this snow and rainstorm isn't entirely bad, besides the road closures and avalanche warnings. So this is the good news part. It's actually given California some much needed drought relief after the intense drought they've experienced in these past years. So keep in mind that drought in California is a very serious problem. And despite the amount of rainfall and snow that they got, that has only taken them to levels of moisture that they should normally have, and not more than that during this time of year. However, Southern California has just gotten more access to the atmospheric river system, which, like the name suggests, is basically a quote unquote river, but it's just water vapor in the sky that kind of forms like a river. So their moisture level has increased. And This is really important simply just because atmospheric river systems and like that kind of moisture gives fresh water, which California is in desperate need of. The Sierras in particular has captured a lot of that moisture and transferred it around Northern California. And what I'm talking about within moistures in the Sierras is just like the snow that has collected in there. But this does deprive neighboring states from gaining access to that moisture, which is the reason why California has experienced lots of snow, but other states in the Western region have experienced snow deficits like Colorado and like Wyoming. We're used to experiencing lots of snow during this time of year, which we have really not received. And historically, we have received more during these winter times. But how do we make sense of this information in regard to our atmosphere, weather, and climate? Well, it's also a good thing to know that climate change is not just about really, really hot weather. It's inclusive of just extreme weather in general. And when we talk about like wildfires that happen, and like the decreasing number of wildfires, but the kind of huger, like bigger effects that wildfires have caused, it's mainly, to my understanding, because it's been really dry that they've been able to spread. And also wind patterns don't really help in containing that wildfire either. So we have seen extreme wet seasons and also extreme dry seasons. The western region of the US has been dry and either colder or hotter than usual, and the southern regions have been experiencing hotter and hotter weather patterns. So this, of course, is contributing more to the conversation of what do we need to do about climate change, and cause at least California officials to talk more about how to address the issue of climate change despite the higher moisture levels.
And I think it is good to mention, I did see some interesting articles pertaining to the California snowstorm. I don't know if I'll be able to find them again, so I do apologize if they're not linked. But we do know, like what YuYu said, the snowstorm has provided some great drought relief, but it's not enough. Hey, like even despite the crazy amount of snow that California has gotten, the amount is just not enough to have fixed the amount of drought, like the drought that just has persisted for years upon years in California. So it is important to take that into consideration. It is a good thing. It's a step in the right. It's not a step in the right direction. It's a crazy snowstorm in the middle of California, but it is a good thing because snowpack is great for melting over a period of time and giving a lot of water to an area, but it's just not enough yet. And I do think that is something that is worth considering.
Yeah. And so with all the talk about climate change, et cetera, it leads to our question for today's podcast. And from Extemp Central, their question was, what role, if any, should the Federal Reserve take in the fight against climate change? I know, kind of weird, kind of wacky, but we'll kind of deep dive into this, or deep dive as much as we can and kind of give answers of our own. So I'll let Spencer start.
So yeah, this is an odd question. I guess I should mention beforehand, this is a good thing for our listeners to know. I pick these questions usually if they've been published in the last five that Extemp Central posts, and admittedly they didn't post anything about Colorado wildfires the week that we're recording, which is really weird, or like California snowstorm, or just kind of an awkward week. So we're talking about the Federal Reserve and climate change together. So in a nutshell, we're really talking about Federal Reserve. There's a whole bunch of parts to it. I think the easiest way to put it is we're talking about Jerome Powell, who is the chair of the Fed, and what actions he should be listening to from maybe like a committee, or what actions he needs to be taking to help show the Fed is interested in fighting climate change, right? And the reason why this is important is you typically have the debate about climate change and the economy. And why that's a big deal is you often hear the argument that if we fight climate change, then the economy is going to be hurt. Or if we don't fight climate change, then the economy is going to succeed. So it's basically an economy versus climate change debate, which, let's just start by saying this. We do know that green energy is cheaper. It's better to produce, and with that being said, it means that more people have access to it, which means that more people can buy it, which does mean it can be economically beneficial. Now, all things considered, the Fed probably does have an important role here, to try to find ways and recommendations for Congress to maybe make the price, like make green energy really competitive for the United States, or pursue paths to best make it economical, right? So the role that I think the Federal Reserve personally has in fighting against climate change is, I mean, I don't want to give the same answer YuYu is going to give, and I already know what YuYu's answer is going to be, but I think the best way to answer this is more of like a report to Congress. And that, I think that's a different enough answer from what YuYu is going to give. Reporting to Congress is a really good step for saying this is the actions the Federal Reserve recommends Congress to take to ensure that we can be able to fight climate change without it damaging our economy. And that can be based off of a number of different things that the Fed can do research upon and discuss issues about, right? Federal Reserve they could do quite a bit. Admittedly, it's not one of the better economic organizations. Just all things to be considered. It's just not a very like productive organization. It does a lot of sometimes like not so great things. And I mean, Jerome Powell, nonetheless, is still like, he might be the chair of it, but he acts like a politician on some occasions, like some things that you have to consider. So I think the best way for the Federal Reserve to go about fighting climate change is by providing a report to Congress, and maybe a report to the president. And I know YuYu is going to give a pretty similar answer. It's just a tad bit different, though.
Yeah. I'm going to just go ahead and say, like, the reason kind of why our answers are pretty similar is just by the nature of the question. When they ask, like, what role, if any, the Federal Reserve should take in, like, the fight against climate change, it's a weird question because it's like talking about the Federal Reserve's role. And that's usually just an association with economics and not really like that much policy related things. So that's why our answers are really similar, is because there's really only like one answer to talk about. And I would just generally say my role is kind of what the Federal Reserve is pursuing now in terms of evaluating climate change. And that is just kind of researching the effects that climate change has had on our economy. And kind of just adding off of that, what they have identified so far recently is that it's hard to quantify kind of the effects that climate change has had on the economy. They did some analysis before where they found that extreme weather conditions has caused the economy afterwards, like after the extreme weather conditions, has caused the economy to like increase or like be more productive. But then again, they're doing analysis about how like climate change is like an ongoing thing. So you're going to have like more ongoing uncertainty with weather patterns, and especially with extreme weather patterns. So they're going to do more research into that and try to provide better analysis of that and what we can do to be like more proactive in the fight against climate change, but also how to protect our financial institutions and individual finances moving forward as we are combating climate change. So what they're doing now in terms of research and what they're trying to provide analytics on and statistics on is basically the role that they have in the fight against climate change.
Yeah, I don't really think there's much more the Federal Reserve can do besides providing information of any sort to Congress, whether that be the Congress, to the president, to the people, or even just gathering information for that matter. It's just, this is a very odd question. I don't think a lot of people would take this. I think it's just very strange the way it's worded. It is a good discussion point, though, if we were to steer off the question and instead, like, you and I can have this discussion here of, well, climate change and the economy is probably the biggest debate, right? That if we were to fight climate change, we'll have an economic collapse. And then there are people who will argue, but if we don't fight climate change, then climate change destroys everything, and then we'll have an economic collapse that way. So what's going to happen, right? Is the economy better now, or is the economy more important now to focus on, or is the economy more important to focus on in the long term? And I think you and I could have that debate all day, right? Because like right now, we're in a recession. We probably need the economy to be good. Okay. But at the end of the day, do we want the economy to be bad in the future when we know it's going to be bad in the future?
Yeah. And in terms of just talking about climate change and its relation to the economy, at least on the Federal Reserve's website or their report for 2021, they seem to acknowledge that climate change does have really long-lasting effects on the economy. And because climate change is ongoing, it's always going to affect our economy negatively. So the best way forward is to do more like scenario analysis about climate change and what we can do to be proactive in terms of protecting financial institutions is like a good step forward in terms of kind of moving the debate about economy versus climate change forward, which is potentially a good thing. But then again, I am skeptical because it is the Fed, but we will see. It is a small part to play in the bigger fight against climate change. Again, we talked about COP26 in last week's episode, in which we, mentioned all of the promises that the United States has made to our world and the countries who participated in COP26 in terms of decreasing our carbon emissions and helping decrease our global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
And I guess this question does say if any, which means that you could say that the Fed has no role in this. And if you make that argument, then I think you're perfectly fine with making that argument here. And to be fair, I think this could definitely be more of a role that scientists play in fighting against climate change. I think this is more of a role that businesses could play with fighting climate change. This might be a role that politicians should be playing to fight climate change, despite them not actually doing so. So this is it's kind of an awkward question. I think that generally you and I probably agree that the Fed has no real role here, but it is good to note that there is a role that they can play, and that is providing documentation pertaining to it, and that information is important for the general public.
Yeah. So if you ever get those types of questions of what role, if any, and it's a really obscure actor or this actor has nothing to do with this action, just say none. Like that'll make your life 10 times easier, and you won't have to come up with an obscure answer that's like really super hyper specific and kind of not relevant at all. So there's our advice on that. I think with all that being said, that concludes this episode pretty nicely. If for those of you who've made it this far, congratulations. Please stay on for my awesome intro. I've heard from a couple of viewers that apparently none of you stayed till the end, which makes me really sad. It means that I've been doing this outro for no reason. But I hope you get the one in the round. If you don't, let us know how you did. Let us know how we did. And again, as always, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to DM either Spencer, me, or our half-hour Twitter or Instagram, because we have that now. Go give those a follow. Be sure to check those regularly for updates. And in terms of our YouTube channel, don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell so you never miss a video and you always have early access to these videos and you can see our beautiful faces and not listen to our annoying voices. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. We will be here again next week.
Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, we will see you all later. Peace.